thank you for coming. You might want to come over closer in if you want, because I guarantee you'll be part of this. This is not going to be a talk like you expect. This will be like the most fun conference talk you've ever experienced, and nothing like anything you've ever done before. I promise that. So, my name is David Blank-Edelman. I am a senior cloud ops advocate at Microsoft, and I want to give you a talk about an environment, a situation that happened to me several employers back. So the best way I know to introduce this talk is to find out how many people in this room remember these Choose Your Own Adventures books. Yes, enough people. Come on in. Do you remember the Choose Your Own Adventures books? Then you're in the right room. Right? So there was this awesome one, Space and Beyond, Journey Under the Sea, Trouble on Planet Earth. You know, they got kind of ridiculous. The Cave of Time, and actually my favorite one, and this is a legit one, I didn't make this one up, You Are a Shark. It really does exist. And this one, which not many people know about, but it was a really, really good one. And that's the one that you are going to be participating in right now. So, good. So what I want you to do is, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about, in this particular case, there existed at the time I was there, when I came to this, at a previous employer, there existed a server in the data center that I inherited as the person in charge of the environment that had been running for a while at the center of, oh look, more people are coming, at the center of that organization's infrastructure. That had been running for a while, and that same machine was still running 19 years later when I left that org. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about that machine and what we can learn from it. So in the interest of protecting the privacy, though I think that machine has since been decommissioned sometime in the last 2 years of this, I'm going to elide the name of the machine a little bit. And for this talk, we're going to call it Tigger. Okay, or TIG for short. For those of you who are a little unclear on the subject, Tigger, yes? Okay, so when I say TIG, that's what I'm going to be talking about, just so you know. Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is it the same machine? And you'll understand what I mean by that. So let me show you a picture, just so you don't think I'm making this stuff up. I legitimately walked into the data center because I'm friends still with the people that work there. This is a picture of what TIG looked like when I walked in the data center. I took this picture, so I'm not making this up, okay? So it's a real machine. We're really talking about this. So, so here's the deal. At this employer, one of the things that my predecessor did that I thought was pretty cool, hi, come on in. One of the things that my predecessor did that I thought was pretty cool is he instituted something that we called Hostbase. What Hostbase was a plain text database, for lack of a better term, that contained all the information about all the machines in our environment. Okay? Plain text, and so as a result, and this database is where we would add new machines, and then from that we would generate things like DNS zone records and other stuff like that. The nice thing about Hostbase is that because it was plain text, we kept revisions of it in RCS, if you really want to know, yes, I know it makes people titter, because I have the same feeling when I hear that as well, because you haven't heard those initials in a long time, I know that. It's a source control system. Think about it as the Git of its day, though actually with command line arguments you would understand. Sorry, just having fun. So the nice thing about that existence of this is it meant that I could go back and look at previous versions of it. So the first time that I saw, when I went and looked at this database, TIG showing up in that database was this right here, was this particular entry. So in this particular case, it showed up for the first time in 1995, back in the heydays when we were all young and whatever, or not alive, or just, you know, a glimmer in our parents' eyes or whatever, or not. And so this is the first time. So I want to point out some things about this that are useful. When a machine called TIG first showed up, it was a Spark 10/30. Maybe there's somebody in the room who still remembers those. It was running SANAS, version 4.13. Okay, which again, if you're an elder, you remember these things. It was Spark. The thing I want to point out that's kind of important about this memory thing, what unit do you think that's in?
Kilobytes.
It was in meg, not kilobytes. It's not really that. I mean, really. It's not really, yeah. No, thank you. It wasn't the lunar rover. It was, it wasn't the Palm Pilot or whatever. So 32 meg, and this says it's got an 8-bit display, which was really cool at the time. And the other thing is because I said that we generated TNS zone files out of this sort of stuff, you can get a sense sometimes for what that machine did by looking at its CNAMEs. CNAMEs are the alternative names for a machine. You can give them essentially aliases, right? It still exists. And so we called it Sun4 local. It was, oh, that's interesting that that's there. I won't say you what that's for. TIG, NTP, you can see kind of some of the things it did. It was the YP master, and I don't know why we called it Tiggy. So if you're curious what a Spark Station 1030 looks like, as long as it calls you to Twitch, it looks like this. This is not this is just from some sales thing. Okay, this is what they used to look like. They used to call these pizza boxes. Does this sound familiar to you, right? Because of the form factor along those lines. And that's what a Spark 1030 looked like. So the thing, so I wanted to point out just that 32 there, just for curiosity's sake. And so when I was trying to figure out, like, what kind of machine was that back then, I went and looked at what the specs were. You can still find these kind of online, and you can see that it had, these processors. And I was trying to figure out, like, how fast was it? Like, what was it? What was it like in terms of and speed and stuff like that. And you can kind of get some sense of this, like it has a floppy, and if you look at this, oh right. So here, let me make this very clear to you. 36 megahertz, right? Pay attention to that on the CPU, okay? So that's an interesting thing. Now, what's interesting about that, of course, is that if you were to go today to Amazon and look, for example, at a Raspberry Pi that you can buy for $36, not $30,000. It is 1.2 gigahertz, 64-bit quad-core ARM-V8 CPU with 1 gig of RAM, right? So that's kind of crazy in itself. And let me see if I can find the little thing that I wanted to show that I don't know if it's here. I have to go dig for it. Just to give you a sense, because I want to talk a little bit about that RAM for a moment. Oh, I do have it. Excellent. This thing that I'm holding in my hand, which you can barely see, it's a little USB key. It has 128 gig. I paid $30 for it. This is more memory than the entirety of the put together of all the machines in the machine room that I was running at the time that had TIG in it. All machines put together had less memory than I'm holding in my hand right now. Just want you to get some sense of the way it works with history. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get into the choose your own adventure part. Okay, here's the deal. What I'm going to do is put in front of you, my kind audience, some choices. You are going to get to choose what happens during this presentation, which slides we go to, what I actually talk about. I am not going to choose any of that. I'm just going to have to roll with it. Okay? So be kind to me when we do this, as we do this. Now, some of you are holding slips of paper that come from the notepad that was in the hotel I'm staying at. It wasn't meant to be a thing, but it's the paper I had. What I would like to do is when I call your number, and we'll try to remember what number it is, I want you to make the choice about what we do next. Then hand the piece of paper to somebody who doesn't have one. Okay? So you will all, probably because of the size of the crowd, be able to choose what we do. So let's go deeper into this stuff. Are we ready? Okay, here's what we want to do. Who's number one? Who has number one? I'm sorry I didn't start at 0. Sir, would you prefer to find out what happened on February 18th, which was the date that we mentioned before? Or would you like to look at what the number one song in the US was on that day in 1995?
What was the number one?
Excellent choice. Let's find out. You actually know what the song is? That would be really impressive if you did.
Was it The Way?
It was not, no, but that would be uncanny if it was. Oops.
It was in April, it was.
How do you know that?
My daughter was born then.
you have to do. There are certain sort of outcomes that you expect. And if those outcomes come up, so you can write a program.
I am so very confused. Where is that coming from? Oh, you know what? It's so very funny. Maybe I have a video running simultaneously. Can you excuse me for...
Basically, what it was is a set of Python libraries.
No, this is not coming from me. Are you sure this is coming from me?
What happened?
How could that possibly be coming from my laptop? I am killing anything that can make audio right now. Okay, back to our regular program. So this was a song by the band TLC, who, if you don't remember, please, if you don't actually remember this band, it's okay, neither did I. But it's pretty good. The name of the song, it's a little bit of a strange song. The name of the song, I'll just take it up and down, it'll be fine. The name of the song, in case you're curious, is Creep. And if I understand correctly, having looked at the lyrics, God help me, but it was basically about, I think it's a pretty heavy song about somebody who is a stalker, basically, that's being talked about. So in case you're curious, those were the heydays, I guess. Okay, so we don't have to look at that, we just have to go on. So so the next revision from Hostbase that we were talking about this host is this. Okay, so what do we notice here? Well, we've upgraded the model. It's no longer a 1030, now it's a Spark 20, which was really damn spiffy back in 1995. It's running CentOS. We've upgraded the version of the OS, that's exciting. But what's even better? We're double the memory at 64 meg, right? And let's ignore the 128 gig key on the podium, if you wouldn't mind. And they look like this, roughly. It's not the same one, but it's roughly like this. So that was kind of interesting. The other thing that was kind of nice about this, if we look at these these weren't the exact ones. But the thing to notice is that basically we've gone to 36 megahertz to, I couldn't tell. I really couldn't find the data to find out what it was because it depended on what you bought in it, right? You know, like how many things you set in for CPU. So all we know is it had 2 slots and it's got a faster bus. Now the question you might ask yourself is, how does this compare to a Raspberry Pi? And the answer is, I don't know, but if you're really that kind of geek, you can go look at this blog post and then this discussion about it in Hacker News about that. And indeed, somebody has benchmarked both of them to compare a Spark 20 to a Raspberry Pi. If that's your jam, go for it. So nobody's taking a picture, so you're not that kind of geek. I have had people in the audience take a picture of that because they like that sort of stuff. Okay, so the question is, this thing updated. Oh yeah, go ahead and take a picture if you want. So this was July 21st. So you might ask yourself, what was the number 2, please. You're number 2. Would you prefer to hear what was the #1 song in the US on July 21st, 1995, or, and think carefully here, what should have been the #1 song in the US on July 21st, 1995? Let me repeat that. Your choice is what should have been, or what should have been.
Maybe I'll choose what should have been.
That was an excellent choice. I'm afraid to say that though this was the same year, it was in fact not at that time. It was another TLC song, who knew, called Waterfall. But this is what I think should have been there. Enjoy it.
The valley of the shadow of death. I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it.
For, you know, copyright purposes, it only goes so long. I'm no fool. So in case you're curious, that was in fact, let's see, does anybody know who did that?
Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio.
By Coolio, that's right. This actually peaked on September 9th, my birthday, in that year. in 1995. And I think it should have been the top one, but it wasn't that way. Okay, so let's move on in history, shall we? So there are a number of things to say about this. So here we are, we're in 1998, 3 years later. It was in October, and the interesting thing about this is at that point in time, I think we started to create this convention where if we were going to upgrade a machine, we would roll in a new machine, we would give it the name something-new, right? You're shaking your head, but this is the way it worked back then, man. We'd roll in a machine, we'd give it the name convention-new, we'd get it ready. When it was ready, we'd swap the names, and congratulations, the new one would be taking the traffic from the old one, right? So congratulations, TIG new showed up on that day, Sun 4. Now we're talking serious horsepower, right? So an Enterprise 450 was a box, here, let me show you a picture, that looked like that.
Oh yeah.
Right? So serious power. It's now running Solaris, God save our souls, 2.6. I don't know. It's really interesting that we didn't know, I didn't make that up, what the CPU was then. We were like, I don't know it, but it's cost a lot of money. It must be pretty good. And now we're up to 256 meg of RAM. Awesome. So it looks like this. So this is the thing that I guess the thing. So the tricky thing, the reason why I think we didn't probably know, I don't know why we didn't know, I remember ordering it, but it was either 250, 300, 400, or 480 megahertz UltraSpark 2 modules with onboard eCache. So this was a good day in October 27th, 1998. And in case you're curious, this would be your biorhythms if you were born on that day. So anyway, those of us who remember biorhythms fondly know what I'm talking about. Those who don't, go back. It was really fun. So anyway, and no, I didn't write this program to do this, though we all wrote one of these if we were alive around then, code that would compute these.
We're headed for a terrible winter.
Yeah, I guess. Ain't that the truth? Okay, so here it is. So in 1998, you might recall that it was dash new. What was really, really, really interesting to me as I go back and look at this is it took until 2000, 2 years later, before we took the old one, this one here, and rotated out of service. I don't know why I decided to call it dash bye-bye, but that was one way to know that we weren't going to that it wasn't the thing you should connect to, right? So this was the thing leaving again in 2000, or getting ready to leave. And just in case you're curious, here it is, the Sun Enterprise 450 UltraSpark 2, 400 megahertz monitor, no monitor, stuff like this. This was when I went online to look this up, because you can still kind of almost buy these things. The cost of this, $13,950. Now, that's the MSRP. The thing with Sun back then is if you wanted them cheaper, you just had to say, yeah, I'm not going to pay that. And they would say, oh, okay, what would you pay? You know, and then you'd have this thing. I don't know if anybody negotiated with Sun back then. Yes?
We did have a lot of, after .com, a lot of people failed, and some would sell us the refurbished hardware.
Oh, I see, yeah.
It wouldn't be put in nice places like dust, heat.
Oh, I have no doubts about it, yes.
A large number of failures on the new boxes.
Yeah, so the gentleman here is pointing out that, like, there was a big refurb market as well, and it wasn't always the greatest. But this is what you in theory would pay. It would be $13,950 for this 400 megahertz machine. Let me, of course, remind you again, $36 for a Raspberry Pi now. And it's probably gone down since this, because whenever this was 2 years ago. It's probably even cheaper than this. Okay, so let's move ahead in time here for a moment. Here it is. Say again? Oh, it's only 30. Well, there it is. You mean for an Enterprise 450?
450 has, I believe, dual power supply.
Yeah, oh, that's right. There's dual power supplies. You're right. Yes, that's true. Yeah, this is true. Can you get a dual? It's not the case for Raspberry Pi. I don't know if they have dual power supplies. I see. Yeah, well, that's probably another $10. Okay, so let's see. Let's move ahead to September 26, 2002. This is when we get a new one in. It's a 280R. It's Solaris. Its memory is CPU is a cheetah. That helps. But I can look it up. It's now got real memory, and it's got VGA. How's that for awesome? And then a little further along, you can see this. You can see where it moved out of new into being into full use. Again, this gap here is really interesting to me. Why it took so long to get it into service, and I don't really know what the deal is. And that is the machine When it updated, yeah, so so it updated, it became a Spark Sunfire 280R running Solaris 9 with this memory, and that's the thing, and that's the machine I showed you before that was still there. So there we are. There's the history. Now the question is when you take a Viking ship and you replace it, all the parts in it, is it the same ship? Is this still the same machine? It's a philosophical discussion we can have later. Okay, so now let's get on with some more stuff about this, about what we learned about this. Okay, are we ready? So who's number 3, right? We're on 3, right? Okay, are you ready? Here's your choice. You get the choice between what did it do or the crown jewels. I recommend the first one because it will give you more context for the other one, but it's your choice, sir. Totally your choice. What would you like? What did it do? Excellent choice. Did you know that you can use hyperlinks in PowerPoint? I hope you didn't know that because it's a terrible idea. Terrible idea, which is what I'm going to use right now. Okay, let's talk about what it did. Make sure, by the way, if you had your turn, give your piece of paper to somebody else. So TIG was an administrative host. It's where we did all the adding of users. It's where all the sort of administration went on. It was the source of truth in our environment, which meant that if you wanted to change something, you had to change it on this machine, for reasons that we'll find out in a moment. It was also the source of time. It was an NTP server for the host. I know, stop looking at me like that. This was a long time ago. I know what you're thinking. It was also for all the privileged processing. So if there were things that had to deal with secure stuff, it all happened on this machine here, right? And the way I like to think about it is it like held all the eggs, right, in the basket. Like we protected this, we patched this, we made careful care that this was the right thing to do, and this was the right thing. And in fact, one of the people from that organization was nice enough to make this for me. Anyway, you have to be a certain other kind of geek to appreciate that. So yeah, I thought this was pretty good. Okay. Great. So now let's go on to number 4, right? I'm on 4. Great. Your choice now is the crown jewels or the family jewels. I recommend the crown jewels, but that's your choice. Okay then. The family jewels it is. The thing to realize about this host is that it contained lots of really tricky, sensitive information. So like if you were to kick us in this particular host, it would be a problem, a real problem. So it had all the user information, all the information that we collected about them. It was the NIS master, which is why I said it was the source of truth before. NIS, for those of people here who don't know this term, NIS was the new name for something that was called Yellow Pages until British Telecom threatened Sun with lawyers. It was a system for allowing you to edit a single file and have the information for that file essentially you could edit. Okay, let's talk about this exactly right on. You would have all these files that were configuration files. You would edit them, and then what would happen is the clients would go ask the master. Don't worry, I'm going to get there in a second. I know where everyone's thinking. It would ask the master or a slave of that master for that information, which means that you didn't have to change the configurations on every one of your hosts. So you wouldn't have to change all the password files. You would change it in one place, and then everybody would query that. It was pretty cool back in the day, kind of not really. It's where we kept our certs and all the privileged information. It was trusted by all our machines, so everybody, NFS mounted it in a way. It had the ability to NFS mount things in a way that was fully trusted. And it didn't have to be up. This was another really key piece of information. If it went down, nothing else did. It was our administrator host, ideally. Now, if everything else went down and it wasn't up, that's an interesting story we can talk about later. Okay, number 5, please. Right, are we in 5? So, does anybody want to help this gentleman who's moaning in the corner? The day we lost roots. Well, you're in for a story, my friend. Let me tell you a story. I'm not proud of this story, but it's a story nonetheless. Once upon a time, one of us, and I want to assume it was me because I'll take the hit here, edited a file on the NIS master on TIG that caused it to be the case that we no longer had root access, privileged access on all of our machines. I think it was we mucked up Etsy Shadow, if you really want to know which one it was. Well, and then we pushed it. Then we pushed the config out. So, because we didn't know at the time, this is like not a thing. So the tricky thing is I remember very clearly at the time, after noticing what had happened, that we no longer had administrative access on any of our machines, thinking to myself, how long before other people figure this out? Like in the rest of the environment, all the users figure this out. Because in theory, they could come to us and say, can I have something? They'd say, oh yeah, I'll take care of that tomorrow. Or they could come to us and say, oh, I'll take care of that in a week so. But like how long before the jig is up before we say like, we can't do jack, so sorry. So that was a question that we had. So, so what do you do in a case like that? After you panic a little bit and you stare at each other and you stare at the floor and you stare at your feet and then you look around a little bit, I realized that the first thing that I needed to do was figure out, well, if we didn't have administrative access, who did? And so one of the things that I did is I looked and I noticed at the time that there was a cron job, that's the thing that periodically runs stuff, ran a program that attempted to check the disk usage on all of our machines. It ran it as root. Again, we were young and stuff like that. So it ran as root, and I thought that was interesting. Now, then I looked to see the program that it ran. Well, when it was running, it used, and this is the way we used to build our own stuff, it ran the GNU version of DU, or DF, I can't remember which, I think it was DU at the time, that time. And I had built the GNU version of DU, and I owned that binary. So what I wound up doing is I replaced that binary with a script of my own. The script did, the first thing the script did was it fixed the problem on all the machines that I needed fixed. And then because I rock, it did a DU. So it would just do what it had to do. So I make this change, I go to bed, and somewhere around 3 a.m., we got our access back to all of our machines, and the day was saved. And that's that story. And no one knew. Well, yeah, if you happen to know it. So that's my story about the day we lost root. So it is possible to hack your own systems. Let's put it that way. OK, we're on number 6.
You died yet?
Has what?
You haven't died. It's because you're an adventure. You didn't die.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, we're not going to die till the end, I promise. And what time are we done? Do you know the specific time?
15 minutes.
Oh, okay. So there's a ton of stuff to do, but this will be good. Okay, so can we be number 6, please? Your choice. I'm going to go anywhere you tell me. And but by the way, we'll probably get to all of them, so don't worry about it. Don't panic about that. Starting start scripts. Okay, so starting start scripts. This was in the day before we had things like Puppet and Chef and configuration management. My predecessor, again, was really cool. He wrote something, or his team wrote something, that called, well, the previous employer's name, IFI. I'm not going to tell you what that is. You can probably guess from a previous picture, but maybe you can't. Who knows? And what it would do is it would, when you booted a machine, it would attempt to come up and take that machine from whatever state it was in to a usable state. Usually we would use it when we put a new machine out there. It would come with Solaris. We'd say, it would come up, it would run this thing, and it would do all the magic stuff necessary to make it what it needed to be. So the cool thing about this was we were ahead of the time, and things were a little self-healing in that environment. Like, if something was broken, you could reboot it, and it might fix itself in a way that it wouldn't before. Now in the day of like configuration management, this is a common thing. We're used to like, desired state, that sort of stuff like that. But at the time, this was a bunch of shell scripts, granted, that would do the cool thing. And so that was something I thought was pretty cool. Okay, number 7, please. Well, you can hand it to somebody else if you want, if you feel comfortable. If you already have one, so give it to somebody who hasn't chosen. That's only fair. Your choice. Okay. A strange terrain. When I went and looked over stuff, thank you for coming. When I looked at, if I could find the mouse, I would be in great shape. Say what? Well, they kind of, well, anyway, we can talk about that later. So when I looked at this, I realized that what we had done, for better or worse, is that there is some weird directories on that machine. One of them was this. Those of you who've ever dealt with Solaris probably know what this was. OpCSW, CSW is, let's see if I get this right. Did I write it down? I didn't. It's like community supported something or other. And what it was this amazing thing where other people would make Solaris packages. You wouldn't have to build everything. There was a community. Does this sound vaguely familiar to you? Would build packages so you didn't have to, and you would just install it using this sort of thing. So that was cool. We created a directory called /priv where we put all the stuff that was private to that machine. We had a shared thing called /arch where we would put all the shared binaries, which is where arch GNU bin du went, in case you're curious from the previous story. And the other thing that was also kind of interesting is that we created something called the name of the employer news. And what that was is that was essentially like an MOTD, a message of the day thing, where if you logged into the machine and you hadn't seen the message associated with that, it would show that to you. Now, and then it would record that it showed it to you. The cool thing about that nobody really understood was whenever we got hacked, whenever somebody came into a thing, one way we could tell where people went and what they logged into is that they would have updated timestamps in that directory on that machine. So it was an interesting little facet. Okay, we're on 8, is that correct? Okay, so your choices are...
Directory of evil.
Sounds great. Good choice.
No, not that one.
Okay, so one of the things that was interesting, I told you that on this machine was a place where we had interesting stuff. One of the things we had was a directory structure that was something, that part you don't care about, called user-problems. This is where we would keep a record of all the problematic interactions with our users or their problematic things. This is where we would keep a log of all the stuff. Because remember, I should say that this organization was a university. I can probably say that, right? And students are kind of interesting and they do interesting things. So when I went back, it was really super interesting to me to look at user problems to see what were the problems that we were having during those days. What was going on with the users? What do we have to worry about? One of the things that I noticed that was really interesting is that there was an inordinate amount of energy spent on IRC. Oh, somebody called me a poopy head on IRC and I want you to stop it. Or I'm going to break into your machine so I can put egg drop, a reflector on your machine. Like that was what people lived for. I know I'm giving you these little recall things here, stuff like that. But we would get stuff thanks to IRC that looked like this. And I did not put the capitals in this. To whom it may concern, the communication system was designed for people with the nice manners. Anybody who rejects this rule will be punished by permanent termination from the chat nodes. Our system detected misconduct behavior from your side. This is only a warning. You will get before your access will be terminated. Please keep this in mind for future. If you have any questions, contact your local operator, whoever the hell that was. No mail will be received by this account. Thank you for your cooperation. IRC Central Automatic System Operator reference something or other. This was in 1993. I added 1993. I didn't add the capitals. So we get stuff like that. Or here was another really awesome message that we got. This was from a grad student. I will now read it to you briefly. First, I'd like to bring to your attention that opening a home address on any net, let's see, keep on going this. That was really nice. So secondly, I would like to tell you all to, this was sent to the main systems group by a grad student because, as I recall, we found porn in his directory. And we said, that's not cool, put it somewhere else. And he said to us, like if disk space is really that limited, tell you what, I pay a lot of money, I will bring in a 40 meg IDE drive that you can hook up as long as I can have that space. And we're like, really, dude? Really? Really? And, but besides with all the money that is poured into this, that was the name of the place, I would think that you as the systems group could afford the $900 to $1,100 for a gig hard drive, plus SCSI controller card, and the 1 to 2 hours it would take to set up the disk map. Anyway, all responses to this message will hopefully reply to, and I thank you for your time. This jerk. But I was like, this is really email that we received to the official address that the dean eventually saw. Stuff like that. I also remember the days where people were like, here, I'm just going to mail you a UU encoded file. That'll show us. So, okay. we now move on to the next choice, please. Who's number 9? Okay, excellent. The day we lost root or the end? Or I can go back and talk about other stuff, but we can also come to an end because that's probably going to be right there. We have 8 minutes. Yeah, this is good. This is good, the good timing. I think this is fine in terms of there. I'm trying to think if there's anything special to say. Oh, you want to go to the pretty picture one? We can zoom over there. I'm totally down with that. Totally down with it. Let me see if I can find it.
We chose the wrong adventure.
Yes, exactly. That's your fault. I take no responsibility for your choices. Make better choices. Okay, so do you want to know? Do you want to actually do those? We can actually do those if that makes you happy. We'll hit them. Okay, we'll hit them because that. Yeah. Okay. Fine. They're crown jewels. Okay, the crown jewels are kind of what we were talking about before, which is this thing had user information on it. It was the NIS master. It had all the certs. It had privileged information, and it's trusted by all machines. It's a lot funnier if you see this one first and then you do the second one. But anyway, so you get the idea. Was that worth it? I hope you feel better. Okay, you want to see the pretty picture. I'm going to show you a pretty picture. I promise I'm going to show you a pretty picture. It's not that. Here's the pretty picture. So I thought what I would do is I would try to do a little forensics on this machine. So with the permission of the people that were there, I took a listing of all of the file systems, all the directories, and all of their mod, create, and update times. Because I wanted to see if I could sense, if I could, like there used to be something called the coroner's toolkit, right? Which was an attempt to do forensics to figure out like what happened on a machine. This was back in the day when this was really cool because what someone would say, like it was really nice because with the coroner's toolkit you could say, okay, well, let's see, looking at what happened, if somebody broke into my system, I see that the header files for the C compiler have been accessed recently. So that means the person who broke in probably compiled something, which could tell you something, stuff like that. So I decided I'd try to do this sort of thing. So what I did is I took this listing, it was an ls-whatever sort of thing, and I thought what I would do is I would put it into a SQL database, and I did. I essentially sucked it in, and then I started to, then given that information, I tried to figure out like what had changed and when, right, which was the idea. And I'm going to say this now because I'm enjoying the heresy of the moment. I wrote the Perl program to do this.
Yes!
So I'm just enjoying that. You can burn me at the stake after the talk. That's totally fine. Okay, so the question was, given this sort of thing, what I wanted to know is, what the heck were these over here, right? So this was meant to say, this is like, when did files get created? And there was a big spike in how many files were created in these times, and what the heck were they? And what were the oldest files on the disk? Like, these were all the kind of questions I wanted to understand. And it's a pretty picture, but the answer is kind of boring. Strange enough, there was this weird path that is out there that was from 1973, so it probably wasn't real, that date, but that's what it was. There was a bunch of stuff that was that sort of stuff. There are 2 files from the account system back there. These are the oldest files. This big chunk here is what happens when we install that packaging system and it came with all of X11. That's what it was, in case you're curious. And the answer is, yes, it's kind of important to talk to, if I was going to tell future me something, one of the things that I learned from next exercise, in terms of coming up with a picture that's this pretty but not all that useful is, without semantic information, it's very difficult when you just try to look at the file system as is to understand the what, the why, the how, what matters on that file system. Super hard to figure out. But that was the pretty picture I was able to draw out using this. Yay me. Okay, so let's see, where are we at? I think we're at here. So who is the last person? Are you number 9?
I was number 9, yeah.
Okay, well that's pretty awesome. So with your permission, I'm going to choose the end. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for coming to listen to me about lost treasures and agents. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to answer any questions about this sort of stuff, like what were we thinking or anything like that. You can hold the magic mic if you want. Just wing it at him.
I actually have a question about your talk, so people have questions.
Oh yeah, you asked me about this talk first, and then we can go back over that old talk. Maybe they'll connect after all that way. Okay, so this gentleman had his hand up. I will gladly answer any questions I can.
So you had his hand around the cards,
Yeah.
but there were 9 cards, there were 9 questions. So is there a reason I handed this man my garbage?
The short answer to that question is there are different paths through the system. I didn't know how many hops we were going to have to take to get to where we had to go. So, and 9 is the number of pieces of paper in the pad they give you at the hotel. So I was just prepping for the possibility we had to. When I gave this talk the first time I gave this, I wore an honest to goodness pith helmet, which I took off because that was ridiculous. But I had these plastic pith helmets for people in the audience, and I had them pass around the helmets. So that's what I had to do. But I was asked to give this talk at the last minute, and I didn't bring my pith helmets with me, strangely enough. So it's a true statement. All true. Other questions? I'm happy to answer other stuff about this or what you think. I mean, to me, this was a bit of a learning experience. It was kind of interesting to look back to see the way we was. The way we were. Yes, please.
Well, did this machine at any time ever have Python on it?
Did this machine ever have Python on it? So when we built Python for that environment, we built it into the NFS directories that all systems saw. So for sure it got it that way, just the way it got it. I think we had a local install of Perl. We did probably also had a local install of Python at some point, because what started happening is that the students there were starting to get really into Python. I was like, okay, let's program in Python. Sounds good to me. So yeah, so for sure that hey, look, there's a connection to the thing. So it was there. In fact, I even remember what was written in Python there that was really good. I had one of those students. Like, the nice thing about working in university is you would get students that were smarter than you were, and I had one of those students who came in. Like, I came in on Monday. He's like, I hope you don't mind, but I've replaced our entire LDAP infrastructure over the weekend. And you know, by the way, the thing that does it is this thing that syncs the data using Python. I was like, okay. And now he's at Google, so he's a really So so doing I don't know what to their systems, but he's phenomenal. He's a really good guy. I think he even lives out here somewhere. I haven't spoken to him in a long time. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to let you go to whatever it is you're going to. Thank you for coming to this substitute talk. It was a real blast to do this with you.